What would
You
you
look
do if you
stunning
discovered
tonight,
your
Evelyn.
husband was planning to kill you
Try to hide
and
your
your unborn
nerves.
baby?
Everyone is
Evelyn
watching.
Cross had 47 recordings, 47 audio files capturing every threat, every confession, every moment her billionaire husband let his mask slip. But here is the terrifying part. The night Julian Ashford found those recordings, he beat his 8-month pregnant wife unconscious.
I am here
Then
today
his mistress
to ensure
pushed
that
her
the
down a
truth's
marble
finally
staircase while he
heard.
watched. And while Evelyn lay in a coma, fighting for her life,
You are now
Julian
under
stood
arrest.
on a stage at the
You have the
Plaza
right to
Hotel
remain
accepting
silent.
an award for
Anything
family
you say
leadership.
can be used against you
He
in a
thought
court
he
of
had
law.
won. He thought his money made him untouchable. He thought no one would ever believe his wife over him. But Julian Ashford made one fatal mistake. He underestimated two brothers from Ohio with nothing but a rusted pickup truck and a promise they made his children, a promise to protect their sister, no matter what. What happens next sent shockwaves across Manhattan. And by the end of this story, you will understand why some secrets refuse to stay buried. Stay with me until the very end, because the final twist will leave you speechless. And if this story moves you, if you believe survivors deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps these stories reach the women who need them most. Now let us begin. She was 8 months pregnant when her husband beat her unconscious. His mistress finished the job, pushing her down a marble staircase while he watched. And while Evelyn Cross lay in a coma, fighting for her life and the life of her unborn son, Julian Ashford stood on a stage at the Plaza Hotel, accepting an award for family leadership. But here's what Julian did not know. His wife had been recording him for 6 months, 47 audio files. Every threat, every manipulation, every confession he thought would never leave that penthouse. And she had sent them to the two people Julian Ashford should never have underestimated, her brothers. Two men from Ohio with nothing but a rusted pickup truck and a promise they made when they were children. A promise to protect their sister, no matter what. What happens next sent shockwaves across Manhattan, because Julian Ashford was not just an abuser, he was a murderer, and the Cross brothers were about to prove it. The hospital room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Evelyn Cross lay motionless in the intensive care unit, her face swollen beyond recognition, her hand curled protectively over her belly even in unconsciousness. Tubes and wires connected her to equipment that breathed for her, monitored her heartbeat, and kept track of the tiny life still fighting inside her. The room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, clinical glow. A single window looked out over Manhattan, where lights twinkled in the darkness like stars that did not care about the broken woman lying in this bed. 3 floors below, a nurse named Grace Henderson finished her rounds and checked her phone. The news alert made her stomach turn. Billionaire philanthropist Julian Ashford accepts Family Leadership Award at Plaza Hotel Gala, gives emotional speech about importance of protecting loved ones. Grace had been a nurse for 22 years. She had seen a lot in that time. Car accidents, heart attacks, cancer patients in their final hours. But nothing made her angrier than what she had seen when they brought Evelyn Ashford into the emergency room 2 nights ago. The paramedics had called it a fall. The husband had called it an accident. But Grace had been doing this job long enough to know the difference between injuries from a fall and injuries from a beating. Falls do not leave fingerprint-shaped bruises on someone's upper arms. Falls do not cause defensive wounds on the forearms. Falls do not leave a pattern of injuries in various stages of healing that told the story of months, maybe years, of systematic abuse. Grace had seen the fear frozen on that unconscious face. She had seen the way Evelyn's hands curled protectively around her pregnant belly, even in a coma, as if some part of her was still trying to shield her baby from whatever had put her here. And she had seen Julian Ashford give his statement to the police with the practiced grief of a man who had rehearsed his lines 1,000 times before. "My wife has been under tremendous stress," he had said, dabbing at eyes that were perfectly dry. "The pregnancy has been difficult. She has been seeing a therapist for anxiety and depression. I blame myself. I should have seen the signs. I should have been there to catch her." The police had written it all down. Of course they had. Who would question Julian Ashford, the billionaire CEO, the philanthropist, the man who had donated $3 million to the police benevolent fund just last year? Grace had wanted to scream, had wanted to grab those officers by their shoulders and shake them until they saw what she saw. But she knew how these things worked. She knew that women like Evelyn Ashford, married to men like Julian, rarely got justice. The money was too deep. The connections were too strong. The system was designed to protect the powerful, not the powerless. But that did not mean Grace was going to do nothing. 700 miles away, Nathan Cross sat in his pickup truck outside a gas station in Pennsylvania, eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. He was driving back to Columbus from a construction job in Pittsburgh, thinking about nothing more complicated than whether he had enough gas money to make it home. The truck was old, a 1998 Ford F-150 with rust spots on the wheel wells and a passenger door that did not quite close right. Nathan had bought it 12 years ago, with money he saved working double shifts at the warehouse, and he had been nursing it along ever since. He was 42 years old, and he looked every year of it. Years of construction work had carved lines into his face and put calluses on his hands thick as leather. His hair was going gray at the temples, and his back hurt when it rained. But he was still built like a linebacker, still strong enough to carry 100-pound bags of cement up 3 flights of stairs, still capable of working longer and harder than men half his age. Nathan had never been to college, had never traveled further than a few hundred miles from where he was born, had never done anything particularly impressive or noteworthy. But he had raised 2 siblings after their father walked out. He had worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. He had sat in the front row at Caleb's high school graduation and Evelyn's college graduation, tears streaming down his face because his baby brother and sister had done something he never got the chance to do. He was proud of them, prouder than he could ever express, and he would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep them safe. His phone buzzed on the dashboard. He ignored it, figuring it was another spam call about extended car warranties or solar panels for his non-existent house. It buzzed again and again. Nathan wiped his hands on his jeans and picked it up. The message was from Evelyn, but it was not a normal message. It was one of those scheduled ones, the kind that sends automatically if you do not cancel it. The words on the screen made his blood run cold. If anything happens to me, check the cloud. Password is mom's maiden name plus my birthday. I love you. Nathan's hands started shaking so badly he dropped the phone. It clattered against the center console and fell into the footwell. He scrambled to pick it up, his heart pounding against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He read the message again, and again, and again. If anything happens to me. Those words did not come from nowhere. Evelyn was a journalist. She was precise with her language. She would not send a message like this unless she genuinely believed something might happen to her. Nathan's mind raced through possibilities. An accident, an illness, a threat she had not told him about, or something worse. He called Caleb. His younger brother answered on the second ring. Caleb's voice was calm, controlled, the way it always was. 2 tours in Afghanistan had taught him to keep his emotions locked down tight, to process information without letting it overwhelm him, to make decisions under pressure that most people could not make at all. But Nathan could hear something underneath that calm, something that sounded like fear. She sent the message, Nathan said. His voice cracked on the words. I know, Caleb replied. I got the same one. And I saw the news. What news? There was a pause. The kind of pause that meant bad things were coming. CEO's wife hospitalized after fall, Caleb said. Julian Ashford's wife, 8 months pregnant, in a coma. Nathan felt the world tilt sideways. The sandwich in his stomach threatened to come back up. That is not a fall, Caleb continued. His voice was harder now, the military edge creeping in. That is a cover-up. I am already looking at the medical records. Her injuries are not consistent with a fall downstairs. They are consistent with a beating. How do you know that? Do not ask questions you do not want the answers to. Nathan closed his eyes. For a moment, he was 12 years old again, standing in the driveway of their house in Columbus, watching the taillights of his father's car disappear around the corner. His mother was inside, crying. Caleb was 3 years old, asking where Daddy was going, and baby Evelyn was in her crib, too young to understand that her father had just abandoned them. Nathan had made a promise that day, standing in that driveway with the autumn wind cutting through his thin jacket. He had promised himself that he would never let anyone hurt his family, that he would be the father they did not have, that he would protect them, no matter what. He had kept that promise for 30 years. "I'm coming to get you," Nathan said. "Already packed. I will be on the curb." Nathan threw what was left of his sandwich out the window and gunned the engine. The old truck roared onto the highway, headlights cutting through the darkness like knives. 7 hours. That is how long it took to get from Pennsylvania to Caleb's apartment in Cincinnati. Nathan did not stop except once for coffee that tasted like battery acid and did nothing to calm his racing thoughts. He kept seeing Evelyn as a little girl, trailing after him and Caleb through the woods behind their house, demanding to be included in whatever game they were playing. She had been fearless back then, climbing trees that were too tall, convinced she would not fall, swimming in the creek when the water was too cold, laughing at the boys who were afraid to join her, always pushing, always testing, always refusing to be told she could not do something. That fearlessness had made her a great journalist. Her investigation into Meridian Holdings had brought down 3 executives. Her expose on pharmaceutical pricing had been nominated for a Pulitzer. She had been on track for a brilliant career, the kind of career Nathan could never have imagined for himself. And then she had met Julian Ashford. Nathan had never liked Julian. From the first moment he met the man, something had felt wrong. Julian was too smooth, too polished, too perfect. He said all the right things and did all the right things and smiled all the right smiles, but there was something underneath that smile that made Nathan's skin crawl. He had tried to tell Evelyn, tried to warn her that something about Julian was not right. But she had been in love, and people in love do not listen to warnings about the people they love. Besides, what did Nathan know? He was just a construction worker from Ohio. Julian was a billionaire CEO with a penthouse in Manhattan and a private jet and connections to people whose names appeared in newspapers and history books. Maybe Nathan was just jealous. Maybe he was just being overprotective. Maybe he was looking for problems that were not there. So he had stepped back. Let Evelyn make her own choices. Watch from a distance as she moved to New York, married Julian, and slowly, gradually, disappeared from his life. The phone calls became less frequent. The visits home stopped entirely. When Nathan did talk to Evelyn, she sounded different, quieter, smaller, like someone had dimmed the light that had always burned so bright inside her. He should have pushed harder, should have demanded answers, should have driven to New York and dragged her out of that penthouse by force if necessary. But he had not, and now she was in a coma, and her husband was accepting an award for family leadership, and Nathan was driving through the night with murder in his heart. Caleb was waiting on the curb when Nathan pulled up. His younger brother looked like he had not slept in days, dark circles under his eyes, jaw tight with tension, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Caleb was 33 years old, but he moved like someone much older. The war had done that to him. 2 tours in Afghanistan, seeing things no one should ever see, doing things that still woke him up screaming in the middle of the night. He had come home with a Purple Heart and a PTSD diagnosis that the VA was not doing nearly enough to treat. These days, Caleb drove for Uber and did freelance security work and tried to stay afloat in a world that did not know what to do with broken soldiers. He was quiet, watchful, brilliant at finding information people tried to hide. The Army had trained him in intelligence work, and those skills had not faded just because he was no longer wearing a uniform. He climbed into the truck without a word. They drove in silence for the first hour. The highway stretched out ahead of them, empty and endless. Nathan kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Finally, Caleb spoke. "I found her medical records." Nathan glanced at him. "How?" Caleb did not answer. He just pulled out his phone and scrolled through documents that Nathan could not read in the darkness. Multiple contusions inconsistent with a single fall, defensive wounds on her forearms, evidence of prior injuries in various stages of healing. Caleb's voice was flat, clinical, like he was reading a military briefing instead of describing his sister's injuries. "And she is 8 months pregnant, Nathan. 8 months. The baby is still alive, but they do not know if there is brain damage. They do not know if either of them will wake up." Nathan's grip tightened on the wheel until his hands ached. "I am going to kill him," he said. "No," Caleb's voice was hard as iron. "We are going to destroy him. There is a difference." Nathan looked at his brother, really looked at him, and he saw something in Caleb's eyes that he had only seen once before. Years ago, when Caleb had come home from his second tour and told Nathan, in a voice that did not sound like his own, about the things he had done in the mountains of Afghanistan. That look said, I know how to hurt people. I know how to make them suffer. And I am going to use every skill I have to make Julian Ashford pay for what he did. Nathan nodded slowly. What do we need? Information, Caleb said. The recordings Evelyn mentioned. Whatever she was documenting, whatever she found, we need to see it. And we need to find out what happened to Julian's first wife. Nathan blinked. His first wife? Caroline Ashford. She died 6 years ago, drowned in a bathtub while Julian hosted a party downstairs. 40 witnesses said he never left the room. You think he killed her? I think men like Julian Ashford do not stop at one victim. I think whatever he did to Caroline, he tried to do to Evelyn. And I think somewhere out there, someone has proof. Nathan stared at the road ahead. The Manhattan skyline was just beginning to appear on the horizon, a glittering wall of light and steel that seemed impossibly far away. How do we find it? We start with the people he has hurt, Caleb said, and we do not stop until we have enough to bury him. They reached Manhattan just as dawn was breaking over the city. The skyline glittered with the promise of a new day, but Nathan felt nothing but dread as they navigated the unfamiliar streets toward the hospital. He had never been to New York before. Neither had Caleb. They were Ohio boys, raised on farmland and factory towns, on Friday night football and church on Sunday, and neighbors who knew your name. Manhattan might as well have been another planet. The streets were already crowded, even at this early hour. Taxis honked, pedestrians streamed past. Everyone seemed to be in a hurry, moving with purpose toward destinations Nathan could not imagine. He felt out of place here. Too big, too rough, too obviously from somewhere else. His work boots and flannel shirt stood out among the suits and designer clothes. His truck, with its rust spots and Ohio plates, drew curious looks from people walking expensive dogs past expensive buildings. But his sister was here, and that was all that mattered. They found parking 3 blocks from the hospital and walked the rest of the way. Nathan had put on his cleanest shirt, but he still felt underdressed among the polished professionals crowding the sidewalks. The hospital lobby was sleek and modern, all glass and chrome and uncomfortable-looking furniture. A security guard stood near the elevators, watching everyone who came and went with the bored alertness of someone who had done this job for too long. Nathan approached the reception desk. A young woman in scrubs looked up at him with the practiced patience of someone who dealt with difficult people all day. My name is Nathan Cross, he said. I'm here to see my sister, Evelyn Ashford. She was admitted 2 days ago. The receptionist typed something into her computer. Her expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy or might have been annoyance. I'm sorry, sir. Mrs. Ashford is not accepting visitors at this time. She is my sister. Nathan felt his voice rising and forced himself to lower it. I drove all night from Ohio. I understand, sir, but her husband has restricted access to approved family members only. The words hit Nathan like a slap. Her husband, the man who had put her in here, the man who was probably at this very moment planning how to finish what he started. Her husband? Nathan's hands curled into fists at his sides. You mean the man who beat her unconscious? The receptionist's eyes widened. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. Caleb put a hand on Nathan's arm. His grip was firm, a warning. Let me handle this, he said quietly. But before he could say anything else, security was already approaching. 2 large men in uniform, their hands resting casually on their belts, their expressions making it clear that they dealt with difficult visitors all the time. Is there a problem here? One of them asked. Nathan wanted to fight. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to push past these men, find his sister, and carry her out of this place. He was bigger than both of them. He had been in enough bar fights to know how to handle himself. He could probably take them both down before anyone called for backup. But what would that accomplish? He would be arrested. Evelyn would still be in her room, alone and unprotected. And Julian would have exactly the narrative he needed. Violent brother attacks hospital staff. Clearly, the whole family is unstable. Caleb's grip on his arm tightened, and Nathan forced himself to take a breath. No problem, Caleb said smoothly. We were just leaving. They walked back out into the morning sunlight. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of exhaust and coffee and 1,000 other city smells that Nathan did not recognize. His hands were shaking with rage. "We cannot just leave her in there," he said. "We are not leaving her." Caleb's voice was calm, but his eyes were scanning the building, the entrances, the security cameras. "We are regrouping. There is always another way in. We just have to find it." They found a coffee shop across the street from the hospital. Nathan sat at a table by the window watching the entrance, while Caleb worked on his laptop. The coffee shop was the kind of place Nathan would never have gone to on his own. Exposed brick walls, reclaimed wood tables, coffee drinks with names he did not recognize, and prices that made him wince. But it had a clear view of the hospital entrance, and that was all that mattered. "I am in the hospital system," Caleb said after a few minutes, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Do not ask how. I was not going to." Julian filed paperwork this morning, emergency custody petition for the baby. He is claiming Evelyn is mentally unstable and unfit to be a mother. There is a hearing in 72 hours. Nathan's coffee cup cracked in his grip. Hot liquid spilled across the table, but he barely noticed. Can he do that? He is trying. And with his money and his connections, he might succeed. Unless Evelyn wakes up and contests it in person, he gets the baby the moment it is born. The words hit Nathan like a punch to the gut. 72 hours, 3 days to save his sister and her child from a monster. There has to be something we can do. Caleb was quiet for a moment. His fingers had stopped moving over the keyboard. When he looked up, there was something dangerous in his eyes. His first wife, he said. "Carolyn, I have been researching her death. The official story is that she drowned in a bathtub while Julian was hosting a party downstairs. 40 witnesses said he never left the room. So he has an alibi. He has 40 alibis, which is exactly the problem." Caleb turned the laptop so Nathan could see the screen. "Look at the timeline." Caroline excused herself to use the bathroom at 9:47 p.m. Julian was giving a toast at 9:50. The coroner estimated time of death between 9:45 and 10:15. Julian was surrounded by witnesses that entire time. So how could he have killed her? He could not. Not personally, but someone could have. Caleb pulled up another document. The detective who investigated Caroline's death was reassigned 2 weeks after the case was closed. He moved to Florida and died in a car accident 6 months later. The medical examiner who did the autopsy retired early, moved to Costa Rica, and has not been heard from since. You think they were paid off? I think people who cross Julian Ashford have a habit of disappearing. And I think somewhere someone has proof of what really happened to Caroline. How do we find it? Caleb smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We start with the cloud. Evelyn was documenting something. Whatever she found, it is in those recordings. Once we know what we are dealing with, we can figure out our next move. Nathan nodded slowly. Then let us get started. They had 72 hours, and they were going to need every second. 3 years earlier, Evelyn Cross had been the kind of journalist who made powerful people nervous. She worked at the New York Tribune, one of the most respected newspapers in the country. Her desk was covered with notes and documents and half-empty coffee cups. Her colleagues respected her. Her editors trusted her. Her sources knew that she would protect them no matter what. Her investigation into Meridian Holdings had exposed a web of corruption that reached from Wall Street to Washington. 3 executives were facing federal charges. 2 congressmen had quietly retired. The story had been picked up by every major outlet in the country. Her expose on pharmaceutical pricing had revealed how drug companies were manipulating patents to keep life-saving medications out of reach for ordinary Americans. The story had been nominated for a Pulitzer. It had not won, but the nomination alone had cemented her reputation as one of the best investigative journalists of her generation. She was fearless, relentless, utterly devoted to uncovering the truth no matter where it led. That is exactly why Julian Ashford targeted her. The first time they met was at a charity gala for children's literacy. The event was held at a midtown hotel, the kind of place where the chandeliers cost more than most people's houses, and the appetizers were served on plates that were probably worth more than Nathan's truck. Evelyn was there to cover the event for the Tribune. She was supposed to write a puff piece about wealthy people feeling good about themselves, but she was also quietly gathering information for a story about how charitable foundations were being used to avoid taxes and launder money. Julian was there to be seen, to shake hands with the right people, to burnish his reputation as a philanthropist and family man. He spotted her across the room. Most journalists at these events were easy to identify. They clustered near the bar, nursing drinks they could not really afford, waiting for someone important to say something quotable. They wore clothes that were slightly out of date, slightly too cheap, slightly wrong for the setting. Evelyn was different. She stood near the edge of the crowd, notebook in hand, watching the proceedings with sharp, skeptical eyes. She was taking notes, but not in the way most journalists did. She was not writing down what people said. She was writing down what they did, who they talked to, how they reacted when certain names were mentioned, what their body language revealed about their true feelings. She was actually paying attention. Julian made his approach with the precision of a military campaign. He did not introduce himself immediately. That would be too obvious, too eager, too much like all the other wealthy men who tried to charm journalists into writing favorable stories about them. Instead, he positioned himself near the bar, ordered a drink, and waited for her to come to him. When she did, he pretended not to recognize her. "Fascinating event, is it not?" he said, gesturing at the glittering crowd with his glass. All these wealthy people, writing checks to feel good about themselves. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. She had expected a pitch, a request for favorable coverage, an attempt to steer her away from whatever story she was working on. She had not expected honesty. "That is a cynical take for someone who appears to be one of them," she said. Julian smiled. It was a carefully calibrated smile. Warm, but not too warm. Confident, but not arrogant. "Appearances can be deceiving," he said. "I grew up in foster care in New Jersey. Everything I have, I built from nothing. It was a lie, of course." Julian Ashford came from old money, generations of it. His grandfather had made a fortune in steel. His father had doubled it in real estate. Julian had tripled it again through a combination of aggressive investing and creative accounting that would have gotten a less connected man sent to prison. But the foster care story played well. It made him relatable. It made him sympathetic. It made people forget that he had been born with more advantages than most people could dream of. He had been telling the story for so long that sometimes he almost believed it himself. Over the next few months, Julian pursued Evelyn with calculated intensity. He was charming, attentive, interested in her work. He remembered the names of her colleagues and asked about her stories. He sent flowers to her office on the anniversary of her Pulitzer nomination. He introduced her to sources that advanced her career. He made her feel special, chosen, loved. "Your colleagues do not appreciate you," he would say, over dinner, at restaurants she could never have afforded on her own. "They are jealous of your success. They do not understand your ambition. Your family means well," he would say, while they walked through Central Park on Sunday afternoons. "But they hold you back. They cannot see how extraordinary you are. You do not need them," he would say late at night, holding her close in his penthouse apartment. "You have me." The isolation was so gradual that Evelyn did not notice it happening. She stopped calling Nathan as often because Julian always seemed to have something planned in when she picked up the phone. She stopped visiting Ohio because Julian always had tickets to something or a trip somewhere that could not be rescheduled. She stopped seeing her friends because Julian's friends were more interesting, more sophisticated, more connected. She stopped trusting her own judgment because Julian always seemed to know better, to see things more clearly, to understand the world in ways she could not. By the time she realized what was happening, it was already too late. The destruction came 6 months into the relationship. Evelyn was working on a new investigation, a story about a tech company that was systematically defrauding its investors. She had documents, sources, whistleblowers willing to testify. She was weeks away from publication. Then a rival outlet broke a different story, one that accused Evelyn of fabricating sources for her pharmaceutical pricing expose. The accusations were completely false. Every source was real. Every document was authenticated. Every fact was verified 3 times over. But by the time Evelyn could prove it, the damage was done. The Tribune suspended her pending an investigation. Her colleagues avoided her in the hallways. Her editors stopped returning her calls. The story she had been working on was killed, its sources too nervous to talk to a journalist whose reputation was in question. 6 months later, she was fired. Not because the accusations were proven true, but because the cloud of suspicion made her too much of a liability. Every story she worked on would be questioned. Every source she cited would be doubted. The Tribune could not afford to have that kind of uncertainty on their masthead. Evelyn fought it. She hired lawyers. She gathered evidence. She documented every fabrication, every lie, every manipulation in the story that had destroyed her career. But the lawyers cost money, a lot of money, money she did not have. Her savings were gone within months. She had to give up her apartment, the little studio in Brooklyn that had been the first place she had ever lived on her own. She applied for other journalism jobs, but no one was hiring a reporter under a cloud of suspicion. She found herself standing in her empty apartment, surrounded by boxes, wondering how her life had fallen apart so completely and so quickly. That was when Julian appeared. He stood in the doorway, immaculate in his tailored suit, his face arranged in an expression of concern and sympathy. "Move in with me," he said, his voice soft. "I will take care of you." She should have said no. She should have gone home to Ohio, moved in with Nathan, started rebuilding her life from the ground up. But she was pregnant by then, and Julian had convinced her that her family would only make things worse. "What can they offer you?" he had asked, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Nathan works construction. Caleb cannot even hold down a job. They do not understand your world. They cannot give you what you need." And Evelyn, worn down by months of fighting, had believed him. So she stayed. The first time Julian hit her was 2 months into the pregnancy. They had been at a dinner party, surrounded by Julian's wealthy friends, and Evelyn had made a joke that Julian did not find funny. It was nothing serious, just a casual comment about how Julian's latest business deal seemed too good to be true. Julian had smiled through the rest of the evening. He had been the perfect host, charming and attentive and utterly in control. But when they got home, his face changed. "Never embarrass me like that again," he said, his voice quiet and cold. "I was just joking. I did not mean anything by it. You made me look foolish in front of my associates. Do you have any idea how important those people are? Julian, I am sorry. I did not realize." He hit her before she could finish the sentence. An open-handed slap across her face that sent her stumbling backward into the wall. Evelyn stood there, hand pressed to her cheek, too shocked to speak. In 32 years, no one had ever raised a hand to her. Not her mother, not her brothers, not any of the boyfriends she had dated before Julian. Julian's expression shifted. The anger drained away, replaced by something that looked like remorse. "Oh God," he said, his voice breaking. "Evelyn, I am so sorry. I do not know what came over me. It will never happen again. I promise." He cried. He apologized. He held her close and swore on his mother's grave that he would never hurt her again. And Evelyn, still in shock, still struggling to process what had just happened, believed him. It happened again 2 weeks later. And then again. And then again. Each time the pattern was the same. Something would trigger Julian's anger. A word, a look, a failure to anticipate his needs. And then the violence would come, always controlled, always calculated, always followed by tears and apologies and promises that it would never happen again. Evelyn learned to recognize the cycle, the tension building like a storm on the horizon. The explosion, sudden and violent. The honeymoon period, all sweetness and gifts and remorseful affection. And then the tension again, always the tension, building and building until it broke. She learned to monitor Julian's moods, to avoid topics that triggered his rage, to make herself small and quiet and invisible, to disappear into the background of her own life. But she never stopped being a journalist. One night while Julian was at a business dinner, a maid named Rosa Martinez slipped into Evelyn's room. Rosa had worked in the penthouse for 8 years. She had served Julian's first wife, Carolyn. She had been there the night Caroline died. Rosa was old and tired and afraid. She had seen too much and said nothing, and the guilt had been eating at her for 6 years. "Be careful, ma'am," Rosa whispered while making the bed. Mrs. Caroline was careful too. She still ended up at the bottom of a bathtub. Evelyn's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Rosa's eyes darted to the door. She was terrified, Evelyn realized. Terrified of being caught talking. Terrified of what Julian might do if he found out. "I cannot say more," Rosa whispered, "but you should be very careful." She hurried out of the room, leaving Evelyn alone with her racing thoughts. That night, Evelyn started recording. She used a burner phone hidden in her vanity drawer, concealed among silk scarves and costume jewelry. Every time Julian threatened her, every time he made a confession he thought would stay between them, every time he let his mask slip and revealed the monster underneath, she pressed record. 47 files over 6 months, hours and hours of evidence, enough to destroy Julian Ashford, if she could ever get it to the right people. But Julian monitored everything: her phone, her email, her credit cards, her social media. She had no money of her own, no bank account he did not control, no way to contact the outside world without him knowing. So she created a dead man's switch. She scheduled messages to her brothers, set to send automatically if she did not check in every 48 hours. She uploaded the recordings to a cloud account that only Nathan and Caleb could access. She mailed physical copies of key documents to the one person she knew Julian would never think to look for: Margaret Wells, Caroline's sister, the woman who had disappeared after Julian's first wife died, and she prayed that she would never have to use any of it. The night everything shattered started like any other. Julian came home early from a business dinner. He had been drinking, not enough to be sloppy, just enough to be cruel. Evelyn was in the master bathroom, standing in front of the mirror, looking at her reflection. Her face was pale and tired. Her eyes had dark circles underneath them. Her body was swollen with 8 months of pregnancy. She did not recognize herself anymore. The fearless journalist who had taken on corporations and corrupt politicians had been replaced by this scared, diminished creature who flinched at loud noises and apologized for existing. She was thinking about her son, the baby growing inside her, wondering what kind of life she could give him if she stayed with Julian, wondering what kind of life she could give him if she left, wondering if there was any escape from this gilded prison she had wandered into. Julian appeared in the doorway. His eyes moved over her body with cold assessment. "You look tired," he said. "Ugly. Pregnancy does not suit you." Evelyn did not respond. She had learned that silence was safer than words. But Julian was not interested in safety that night. His eyes moved around the room, cataloging everything, looking for something to criticize. They stopped on the vanity drawer, the one that was slightly open, the one where she kept the burner phone. Julian crossed the room in 3 strides. His hand closed around the drawer pull and yanked it open. Silk scarves spilled onto the floor. And there, nestled among them, was the phone. Julian picked it up. His thumb moved across the screen, scrolling through recordings. 47 files. Hours of evidence. Every threat, every confession, every moment when his mask had slipped. His face did not change as he listened. That was what terrified Evelyn most. There was no anger, no surprise, no emotion of any kind, just cold, calculating assessment. "Did you think you were clever?" His voice was soft, almost gentle. "Did you think anyone would believe you over me?" Evelyn tried to run. She made it 3 steps before his hand closed around her arm and yanked her back. The beating was not done in rage. It was done in cold, calculated punishment. Her cheek, her stomach, her back, each blow precise, controlled, delivered with the detachment of a man swatting a fly. "Please," Evelyn gasped. "The baby." Julian paused. He looked at her with something that might have been curiosity. "Do you really think I care about the baby?" A voice came from behind them. "Going somewhere?" Evelyn turned. Nicole Blake stood in the hallway, dressed in silk, watching the scene with a satisfied smile. Nicole, Julian's personal assistant, the woman Evelyn had suspected for months was having an affair with her husband. But Nicole was not just a mistress. She had been helping Julian the entire time, switching Evelyn's prenatal vitamins with sedatives, intercepting her mail, reporting her every move. She had been living in the guest wing for months, watching Evelyn, documenting her behavior, helping Julian build the case that his wife was mentally unstable. "You should have stayed quiet," Nicole said, "like his first wife." Evelyn looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had smiled at her at dinner parties, who had complimented her dresses and asked about her pregnancy, who had pretended to be her friend while secretly helping Julian destroy her. And something clicked. "Caroline did not stay quiet," Evelyn said. "That is why she is dead." Nicole's smile vanished. She pushed. Time seemed to slow down. Evelyn felt herself falling backward, tumbling down marble stairs that seemed to go on forever. Each impact drove the breath from her lungs. She tried to curl her tightly around her stomach to protect her son from the fall, but her arms would not cooperate. She landed at the bottom, broken, still. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Julian standing at the top of the stairs, calmly adjusting his cufflinks. Nicole beside him, one hand resting on her own stomach, smiling down at Evelyn's broken body. "Make the call," Julian said, his voice utterly calm. The usual story. And then there was nothing. The note was slipped into Nathan's hand as security escorted him out of the hospital. He did not notice it at first, too consumed with rage to pay attention to anything except the guards pushing him toward the exit. His mind was spinning with plans and possibilities, none of them good. He could come back at night. He could find a way to sneak in. He could wait for Julian to show his face and beat the truth out of him. But Caleb's grip on his arm was firm, steering him toward the exit, keeping him from doing something stupid. They were almost to the door when Nathan felt something pressed into his palm. He glanced down and saw a crumpled piece of paper. When he looked up, a nurse was walking away, her back already turned, disappearing into the crowd of hospital staff. Outside, he unclenched his fist and smoothed out the paper. "Her injuries do not match a fall. Room 412. Night shift changes at 11 p.m. Nathan showed the note to Caleb. "Someone is on our side," he said. Caleb studied the note, his expression unreadable. "Or someone wants us to think they are. Could be a trap. Do we have a choice?" "No." Caleb folded the note and put it in his pocket. "We do not." They spent the day preparing. Caleb used his laptop to dig deeper into Julian's history, pulling financial records and corporate filings and news articles from years ago. Nathan paced the hotel room like a caged animal, checking his watch every few minutes, counting down the hours until they could see their sister. By evening, Caleb had assembled a picture of Julian Ashford that made Nathan's blood boil. The man was a monster hiding behind a mask of philanthropy. His foundation donated millions to children's hospitals and literacy programs, but the money came from shell companies that existed only on paper. His business deals left a trail of bankrupted partners and ruined competitors. His ex-wife had died under suspicious circumstances, and the investigation had been closed with indecent haste. And now he had Evelyn. At 11:15, they walked through a side entrance of the hospital. The door should have been locked, but mysteriously it was not. Nathan wondered if the nurse who had passed him the note had something to do with that. The hallways were quiet at this hour. Most of the staff were at the nurse's station, changing shifts, catching up on paperwork. Nathan and Caleb moved quickly and quietly, following signs to the fourth floor. Room 412 was at the end of a dimly lit corridor. The door was propped open with a rubber wedge. Nathan's heart was pounding as he stepped inside. Evelyn lay in the bed, surrounded by machines. Her face was swollen and bruised, almost unrecognizable. Tubes ran into her arms and nose. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking her heartbeat, her breathing, the tiny heartbeat of her unborn child. Nathan felt his knees go weak. He had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling. His baby sister. The fearless little girl who had followed him through the woods. The brilliant journalist who had exposed corruption and fought for justice. She looked so small lying there, so broken. He moved to the chair beside her bed and took her hand. It was cold, limp, but when he squeezed it gently, he felt her fingers twitch in response. "Evelyn, can you hear me? It is Nathan. Caleb is here too. We are going to get you out of this, I promise." Her hand twitched again. Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Caleb stood by the window watching the door. "We have to work fast. Security makes rounds every 30 minutes. Nathan nodded but did not take his eyes off his sister's face. "We found the recordings," he said softly. "We have everything you saved. But Julian is trying to take the baby. There is a custody hearing in 72 hours. No response, just the steady beeping of machines. "We need more," Caleb continued, moving closer to the bed. "The recordings are not enough on their own. Julian's lawyers will bury them. We need proof of what he did to Caroline. Do you know anything?" Evelyn's hand moved again. Her fingers tapped against Nathan's palm in a pattern. "Short, short, long. Short, long, short." "Morse code," Caleb said, recognition flickering in his eyes. "M-A-R. He leaned closer. "Margaret? Is that a name?" 2 taps. "Yes." "Who is Margaret?" Evelyn's fingers spelled out more letters, slowly and deliberately. "S-I-S-T-E-R-C-A-R-O-L-I. N-E. Caroline's sister, Nathan said. Margaret is Caroline's sister. Another 2 taps. Caleb was already pulling out his phone, searching for information. Margaret Wells. She disappeared after Caroline's funeral. No forwarding address, no social media, no digital footprint at all. She vanished like she never existed. Evelyn tapped again. Vermontdocsmailed. She is in Vermont, Nathan asked. You mailed her documents? 2 taps. What kind of documents? But Evelyn's hand had gone still. The effort of communicating had exhausted her. The monitor showed her heart rate elevated, her breathing shallow. A footstep sounded in the hallway. Nathan and Caleb froze. The nurse from earlier appeared in the doorway. Grace, according to her name tag. She was carrying a chart and looking over her shoulder, clearly nervous. You have about 3 minutes before the guard comes back, she said quietly. And you need to know something else. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. There is a lawyer named Helen Brooks. She specializes in domestic violence cases against wealthy perpetrators. She has been trying to reach Evelyn 4 weeks, but Julian blocked all her calls. Caleb took the business card Grace offered. Why are you helping us? Grace's jaw tightened. Her eyes were bright with emotion that she was clearly struggling to control. My sister was killed by an abusive husband 10 years ago. He was rich, connected, had lawyers who made the evidence disappear, and witnesses who suddenly could not remember what they saw. He served 18 months for manslaughter and got out on good behavior. She paused, composing herself. I swore after that I would never stand by and watch it happen again. Not if I could do something to stop it. Nathan looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who was risking her job, maybe her career, to help strangers. Thank you, he said, for everything. Just get her out of here. Grace checked her watch. Now go, and do not come back through the main entrance. They slipped out the way they came. The night air was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of exhaust and something that might have been rain. Nathan drew a deep breath, trying to clear his head. We have a name, Caleb said as they walked back to the truck. And a lawyer. That is more than we had this morning. 72 hours, Nathan reminded him. That is all we have. Then we better not waste them. They found Helen Brooks the next morning in a cramped office above a dry cleaner in Brooklyn. The building was old and tired. The stairs creaked ominously under Nathan's weight, and the hallway smelled of cleaning chemicals and old paper. But the office itself was surprisingly organized. File cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled with neat handwriting. A large corkboard displayed photographs and documents connected by colored string. The desk was covered with legal briefs and coffee cups, the detritus of someone who worked long hours for not enough pay. Helen Brooks was a small woman in her mid-50s. Her hair was silver-streaked and pulled back in a practical bun. Her clothes were professional but not expensive, the kind of outfits that said she cared more about the work than the appearance. But her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and when she looked at Nathan and Caleb, there was recognition there. Nathan Cross, she said, I have been following your sister's case. How do you know who we are? Because I have been waiting for someone to fight back against Julian Ashford for 6 years. She gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Sit. We have a lot to discuss. Over the next hour, Helen laid out everything she knew about Julian Ashford, the pattern of abuse that stretched back decades, the first wife who died under suspicious circumstances, the network of lawyers and doctors and public officials who helped Julian cover his tracks, the witnesses who had been paid off or intimidated into silence, the investigations that had been quietly closed, the evidence that had mysteriously disappeared. He has done this before, Helen said, her voice hard with barely controlled anger. Caroline Ashford was not his first victim. There were women before her, women who disappeared or changed their stories, or died in convenient accidents. And Evelyn will not be his last, unless we stop him. What do we need to win? Caleb asked. More than what you have. Helen spread her hands on the desk. The recordings are powerful, but they are not enough on their own. Julian has the best lawyers money can buy. They will argue the recordings were manipulated, taken out of context, obtained illegally. They will drag out the proceedings until your sister runs out of money and hope. She is in a coma, Nathan said. She does not have money to begin with, which is why we need corroboration. Witnesses, Physical evidence. Something that proves Julian's pattern of behavior beyond any reasonable doubt. Nathan leaned forward. What about Caroline's sister? Margaret Wells? Evelyn said she mailed her documents. Helen's expression sharpened with interest. Margaret has evidence. I have always been certain of it, but she disappeared after the funeral. Changed her name, moved somewhere Julian could not find her, went completely off the grid. Evelyn said she is in Vermont. Vermont is a big state, and Margaret does not want to be found. Julian's people made it very clear what would happen if she ever talked. We have to try, Caleb said. If Evelyn trusted her with documents, there must be a reason. Helen nodded slowly. It is possible, but we cannot count in finding her in time. We need to build our case with what we have. They spent the rest of the day reviewing evidence. The recordings, which Helen listened to with growing horror on her face. The medical records, which documented a pattern of injuries that no fall could explain. The financial documents that Caleb had pulled from places Nathan did not want to think about. By evening, they had the outline of a strategy. It was not enough, but it was a start. Nathan was about to suggest they break for dinner when Caleb's burner phone rang. Unknown number. Caleb hesitated for a moment, then answered anyway. Your sister was on the news last night, a woman's voice said. CEO's wife hospitalized after tragic fall. I have heard that story before. Caleb's expression flickered. He hit the speaker button so Nathan and Helen could hear. Who is this? My name is Margaret Wells. A pause. The sound of someone taking a deep breath, gathering courage. 6 years ago, Julian Ashford murdered my sister Caroline and made it look like an accident. I have been hiding ever since, waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to him publicly. She paused again. I think your sister might be that person. Nathan's heart started pounding. We need your help. A long silence. In the background, Nathan could hear the sounds of a quiet room, wind outside a window, a clock ticking. I know, Margaret said finally. That is why I am calling. I have evidence, everything Caroline documented before she died. Her journal covering the last year of her life. Photographs of injuries Julian caused. Financial records showing she was planning to leave him. And a voicemail she left me the night she died. Can you bring it to us? Not there. Julian has people everywhere, eyes and ears in places you would never expect. But I can meet you somewhere neutral. Another pause. There is a church in Vermont, St. Michael's outside Montpelier, small place off the main road. I will be there tomorrow at noon. We will be there, Caleb said. One more thing. Margaret's voice was heavy with emotion. I need you to understand something. I was a coward. After Caroline died, Julian's people came to see me. They were very polite, very civilized. They explained what would happen if I ever talked about what I knew. What did they say? Margaret's laugh was bitter. They did not have to say much. The detective who investigated Caroline's death? He was reassigned 2 weeks later. 6 months after that, he died in a car accident. Single vehicle, middle of the night, no witnesses. Nathan felt his stomach clench. The medical examiner who did the autopsy? He retired early and moved to Costa Rica. No forwarding address, no contact information. He might as well have ceased to exist. So why are you coming forward now? Helen asked. Because your sister did something Caroline never got to do. Margaret's voice was stronger now, more certain. She documented everything. She fought back. She went public instead of staying silent. A beat. And if she is willing to stand up to Julian Ashford, then so am I. The line went dead. Nathan looked at Helen. Is this real? Or is it a trap? It could be either, Helen said carefully. Julian has people everywhere. This could be exactly what we need, or it could be an ambush. Nathan thought about Evelyn lying in that hospital bed, about the baby growing inside her, about the custody hearing in less than 60 hours. We have to take that chance, he said. We are running out of time. Caleb was already grabbing his jacket. I will drive. 12 hours later, they were standing in a small stone church in the Vermont countryside. Snow was falling softly outside, covering the world in white. The church was old, its wooden pews worn smooth by generations of worshippers. Stained glass windows filtered the gray winter light into patterns of color on the stone floor. Margaret Wells was waiting for them in a back pew. She was a slight woman in her early 40s, with dark hair going gray and eyes that held 6 years of fear and grief and guilt. She looked tired, worn down by years of hiding and watching over her shoulder and wondering if today was the day Julian's people finally found her. But there was something else in her eyes too, something that looked like hope. She had a folder in her lap. "This is everything," she said without preamble. Carolyn's journal from the last year of her life. She documented every beating, every threat, every time Julian made her feel like she was going crazy. Photographs she took of her injuries after he hit her. Financial records showing she was planning to leave. Liquidating assets in secret. Preparing to run. "And the voicemail?" Nathan asked. Margaret's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. She pressed play. Caroline's voice filled the church, thin and terrified and heartbreaking. "Maggie, if something happens to me, it was Julian. I tried to leave today. He found out. I do not know how, but he knew. He said he would kill me before he would let me go. And Maggie, I believe him. I am so scared. I love you so much. I am sorry I was not stronger." The recording ended. Silence filled the church, broken only by the soft sound of snow falling against the windows. Nathan felt tears running down his face. He did not bother to wipe them away. "She called me that night," Margaret said softly. "I did not answer. I was at a party, celebrating a promotion at work. I let it go to voicemail because I figured I would call her back the next day." She paused, struggling to compose herself. By the time I listened to it, she was already dead. They found her in the bathtub the next morning. The official story was that she fell and hit her head, drowned before anyone could help her. Nathan looked at the photographs spread across Margaret's lap, bruises on arms and faces, injuries in various stages of healing. The documented history of a woman being slowly destroyed by someone who claimed to love her. "That is not your fault," he said. "What happened to Carolyn?" Margaret shook her head. "I know, but it felt like my fault for a long time. I should have answered that call. I should have done something." "You are doing something now." Margaret looked at him, at Caleb, at the evidence in her hands that could finally bring Julian Ashford to justice. "Can you really stop him?" she asked. Nathan thought about Evelyn, about the baby, about the promise he had made 30 years ago. "We are going to try. Day 3. Evelyn Cross opened her eyes. For a long moment, she did not know where she was. The ceiling above her was white and institutional, marked with the kind of acoustic tiles you saw in office buildings and hospitals. The air smelled of antiseptic and something else, something chemical and unpleasant. She tried to move and felt resistance. Tubes in her arms, wires attached to her chest, a monitor beeping steadily beside her bed. Hospital, she thought. I am in a hospital. Then the memories came flooding back. Julian's face, Nicole's smile, the sensation of falling, tumbling, each impact driving the breath from her lungs. The crack of her head against marble, the darkness that swallowed her whole. Her hands flew to her stomach. The baby. Please God, let the baby be okay. She felt movement beneath her palms. A kick, strong and certain. Her son was still alive. Evelyn let out a breath she did not know she had been holding. Tears of relief streamed down her face. A nurse entered the room, clipboard in hand. She was young, with tired eyes and a kind face. When she saw Evelyn awake, her expression shifted from routine to surprise. "Mrs. Ashford, you are conscious. Let me get the doctor." "Cross." Evelyn's voice was raw, barely above a whisper. Her throat felt like she had swallowed sandpaper. "My name is Evelyn Cross." The nurse hesitated, then nodded and hurried out of the room. Within minutes, there was a team of medical professionals surrounding her bed. Doctors shone lights in her eyes and asked her to squeeze their fingers and tested her reflexes. Nurses checked her vital signs and adjusted her IV and made notes on their tablets. Evelyn answered their questions carefully. She gave no indication that she remembered how she had really gotten here. She expressed no suspicions about her husband. She was the perfect patient, grateful to be alive, confused about what had happened, eager to cooperate. But her mind was racing. Julian would know she was awake soon, if he did not know already. He would come to the hospital, all concern and sympathy, playing the devoted husband for the staff and cameras. He would bring flowers and hold her hand and whisper threats in her ear when no one was looking. And then he would find a way to finish what he started. She had to be ready. Over the next several hours, Evelyn gathered information. She memorized the names of every doctor and nurse who came into her room. She noted shift change times, security patrol patterns, the location of exits and stairwells. She pretended to be weaker than she was, sleeping more than she needed to, giving herself time to think and plan. When Grace came in that evening, Evelyn was ready. "My brothers," she whispered as Grace checked her vitals. "Did they come?" Grace glanced at the door, then nodded. "They were here 2 nights ago. I helped them get in. Are they safe?" "For now, they are working with a lawyer named Helen Brooks, and they found someone else, Margaret Wells." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Thank God." "There is more." Grace's voice was low, urgent. "Julian's lawyers are pushing the custody hearing. It is scheduled for 2 days from now. If you cannot contest it in person, I know." Evelyn opened her eyes, looked at Grace with fierce determination. "I will be there." "Mrs. Cross, you can barely walk. You have been in a coma for 3 days. You have broken ribs and a concussion, and you are 8 months pregnant. I have spent 3 years letting Julian Ashford control my life." Evelyn pushed herself up against her pillows, ignoring the pain that shot through her body. "He beat me. He tried to kill my baby. He is not going to win this. I will crawl into that courtroom if I have to." Grace was quiet for a moment, studying Evelyn's face. Then she smiled. A small smile, but a real one. "I believe you will." She pulled something from her pocket. "A burner phone. Your brother Caleb wanted you to have this. His number is already programmed in." Evelyn took the phone like it was a lifeline. "Thank you for everything you have done." "Just survive," Grace said. "That is all the thanks I need." That night, Evelyn called her brothers. Nathan answered on the first ring. "Evelyn, thank God. Are you okay?" "I am alive." Evelyn's voice was stronger now, fed by purpose and anger. "That is more than Julian wanted. We have Margaret's evidence. Helen thinks we have enough to get the custody petition dismissed. That is not enough." Evelyn looked at the door of her room, making sure no one was listening. "We need to destroy him, Nathan. Not just stop him, destroy him, so he can never hurt anyone else the way he hurt me and Caroline. We are working on that. But we need time. We do not have time. The custody hearing is in 2 days. Then we will be ready in 2 days. There is something else you should know." Evelyn lowered her voice even further. "I mailed copies of key documents to Margaret 3 months ago. Evidence I did not trust to the cloud. Julian does not know they exist." "What kind of evidence?" "Financial records, showing money flowing from Ashford Dynamics to shell companies right before Caroline died. Payments to the detective who was supposed to investigate, to the medical examiner, to people who were supposed to ask questions and never did." She paused. "There is also information about a woman named Vanessa Cole. She is Julian's fixer. She has buried 15 years of his crimes. But I heard Julian talking on the phone last month. He is planning to eliminate her. She knows too much and he does not trust her anymore. You think she might turn on him? I think Vanessa wants to survive. And the only way she survives is if Julian goes down before he can get to her. How do we reach her? I do not know, but you need to find her. She is the key to everything." They talked for another hour, planning, strategizing, preparing for the battle ahead. By the time Evelyn hung up, she was exhausted but determined. Julian Ashford thought he had broken her. He thought she was just another victim, just another woman he could silence and control and eventually discard. He was wrong. The next morning, Evelyn had an unexpected visitor. Dana Miller stood in the doorway of her hospital room, her college roommate, her best friend, the woman who had stood beside her at her wedding and promised to be there through thick and thin. Dana was trembling. Tears were streaming down her face. She could barely meet Evelyn's eyes. "I am so sorry," Dana whispered. "I did not know what he would do." Evelyn felt her blood run cold. "What did you do, Dana? They told me you were sick, that you needed help." Dana's voice was breaking. "Vanessa Cole came to see me. She was so sympathetic, so concerned about you. She said you had been having delusions, that the recordings were proof that you were paranoid and unstable, that you were a danger to yourself and the baby." "Dana," Evelyn's voice was flat. "Dangerous. What did you do?" Dana finally looked up. Her face was ravaged with guilt and shame. "I gave them your cloud password. I told them you were planning something. I have been reporting to them since you woke up. The words hit Evelyn like a physical blow. Everything they had planned, everything they had worked for, everything they had tried to keep secret. Julian knew it all. Why, Evelyn asked. Her voice cracked on the word. Why would you do this to me? I trusted you. You were my best friend. Dana's sob echoed in the quiet room. My mother has cancer. The treatments are bankrupting us. We are losing the house. And they offered me money. Enough to save her. So you sold me. I thought I was helping you. I thought they were telling the truth. You thought what Julian wanted you to think. That is what he does. He finds your weakness, your vulnerability, and he exploits it. He turns the people you love into weapons against you. Evelyn looked at the woman who had been her closest friend for over a decade. The woman who had held her hand through bad breakups and job losses. The woman she had trusted with her secrets and her fears. Now that woman was a stranger. Now that woman was an enemy. Get out, Evelyn said. Please, Evelyn, let me explain. There is nothing to explain. You betrayed me. You helped the man who tried to kill me and my baby. Whatever friendship we had, it is over. Now get out of my room before I call security. Dana fled, sobbing. The door had barely closed behind her when it opened again. Hospital security filed in, 4 men in uniform, their faces professionally blank. And Julian walked in behind them. He looked immaculate as always. Charcoal suit perfectly tailored to his frame. Silver cufflinks catching the light. Hair styled, shoes polished. The picture of a concerned and devoted husband. But his eyes were cold, calculating. The eyes of a predator who had cornered his prey. Evelyn, darling, he said, his voice dripping with false concern. I am so glad you are awake. I have been so worried about you. Evelyn did not respond. She was watching the security guards position themselves around the room, blocking the exits. The doctors agree that you need specialized care, Julian continued. Somewhere quiet, where you can recover from your trauma and get the help you need. I have made all the arrangements. I am not going anywhere with you. Julian's smile did not waver, but something in his eyes shifted, hardened. You do not have a choice, darling. The paperwork is filed. The doctors have signed off. You have been diagnosed with acute psychosis. You are a danger to yourself and your baby. I am a danger to you. That is what you mean. Julian stepped closer to the bed, close enough that only she could hear what he said next. You should have stayed quiet, Evelyn. You should have been a good wife. Now I am going to take everything from you. Your freedom, your reputation, your son. The door opened one more time. Nicole Blake walked in, her hand resting casually on her own stomach, her face arranged in an expression of false sympathy. Do not worry about the baby, Evelyn, Nicole said sweetly. Julian and I will take wonderful care of him. We have been planning our family for months. Evelyn stared at her. Nicole was pregnant, Julian's child, the real heir he had always wanted. Your son will not be needed, Julian said softly. In fact, it might be better for everyone if something unfortunate happened during the transfer. The threat was clear. Her baby's life meant nothing to Julian Ashford. Less than nothing. Evelyn looked at Dana, who was sobbing in the corner, having apparently been unable to make herself leave. At Nicole, smiling with smug satisfaction. At Julian, adjusting his cufflinks with the calm of a man who believed he had already won. And she made a decision. Fine, she said, letting her shoulders slump. I will go quietly. Julian's eyebrows rose slightly. Pardon? You win. I cannot fight you. I cannot stop you. Evelyn made her voice sound defeated, broken. Just promise me you will not hurt the baby. Julian studied her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face for deception. Then he smiled. I knew you would see reason eventually. You always were the smart one, Evelyn. Smarter than Caroline, anyway. She fought until the very end. Look where that got her. He nodded to the security guards. Get her ready for transport. They strapped her to a gurney, loaded her into a private ambulance. Julian climbed in beside her, sitting in the jump seat, still smiling that patient, terrible smile. The ambulance doors closed. Evelyn felt the vehicle begin to move, and she smiled. Julian's expression flickered. What is so funny? Evelyn reached into the folds of her hospital gown and pulled out the burner phone Caleb had given her. You should have searched me. Before Julian could react, she pressed the button that activated the GPS tracker. The button that sent their location to Nathan's phone. The button that would bring her brothers down on Julian Ashford like the wrath of God. They know exactly where we are, Evelyn said, and they are coming. Julian's face went pale. The ambulance jerked to a sudden stop. Someone was blocking the road. The doors flew open. Nathan Cross stood there, his massive frame silhouetted against the gray winter sky. His fists were clenched. His eyes were blazing. Behind him, Caleb had the ambulance driver at gunpoint. And for the first time in 3 years, Evelyn felt something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. The safe house was a basement apartment in a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn. From the outside, there was nothing to distinguish it from any other building on the block. Brownstone facade, small windows. A door that led down a narrow flight of stairs to a heavy steel entrance. But inside, the apartment had been transformed into a command center. Helen Brooks was there when they arrived, surrounded by documents and legal briefs. She had been up all night preparing motions and reviewing evidence and making phone calls to contacts who owed her favors. "We need to move fast," Helen said, helping Nathan get Evelyn settled on the couch. "Julian will have the police looking for you within the hour. Kidnapping, assault, obstruction of justice. He will throw everything he has at you." "Let him," Nathan growled, his hands still shaking with adrenaline and rage. "We are done hiding." "No," Evelyn said. Her voice was weak but determined. "We are not hiding, but we need to be smart about this." Caleb was already setting up his laptop on the kitchen table. "I have been tracking Julian's movements, his financial transactions, his communications." He turned the screen so the others could see. "He is liquidating assets, preparing to run, moving money through offshore accounts to places where it cannot be traced. He will not run," Evelyn said. "His ego will not let him. He thinks he can still win this. Then we need to make sure he cannot." Helen spread documents across the coffee table. "Margaret's evidence, combined with your medical records, establishes a clear pattern of abuse spanning 2 marriages. I can file for an emergency restraining order. Get protection for you and the baby." "That is not enough," Caleb said, shaking his head. "His lawyers will challenge it, delay it, bury it in motions and appeals. By the time it works its way through the courts, Julian will have found another way to get to her. Then we need to go public." Everyone turned to look at Evelyn. She pushed herself up against the cushions, wincing at the pain in her ribs. "Julian controls the narrative right now. He is the concerned husband, the philanthropist, the family man trying to save his troubled wife from her violent brothers. We need to change that story." "How?" Nathan asked. "I know a reporter at the Tribune, Megan Torres. We went to journalism school together. She's been wanting to write about Julian for years, but she never had the evidence." Evelyn paused, taking a breath. "If we give her everything, the recordings, Margaret's evidence, the financial documents, she can blow this story wide open, put it on every front page in the country, make it so loud that Julian cannot bury it." Helen nodded slowly. "It could work, but it is risky. If we go public before we have legal protection in place, Julian could have you arrested, committed, locked away before the story even runs. Then we get the protection first, then go public." They worked through the night. Helen filed emergency motions. Caleb hacked into systems he should not have been able to access, gathering more evidence, more documentation, more proof. Nathan stood guard by the door, watching the street, refusing to sleep, refusing to leave his sister unprotected for even a moment. Margaret arrived around midnight with the rest of her evidence. Everything she had saved, everything Caroline had documented. 6 years of secrets, finally ready to see the light. By dawn, they had assembled a case that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. Financial fraud, tax evasion, obstruction of justice, witness tampering. And at the center of it all, the murder of Caroline Ashford, documented in her own handwriting, recorded in her own voice. Helen presented the evidence to a sympathetic judge that morning, a woman named Patricia Reyes who had a reputation for protecting victims of domestic violence and a personal grudge against wealthy abusers who thought they were above the law. The restraining order was granted immediately. For the first time in 3 years, Evelyn Cross was legally protected from Julian Ashford. They celebrated. Just for a moment, Nathan bought champagne that nobody actually drank. Margaret cried tears of relief that had been building for 6 years. Helen smiled a small, tired smile that said she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Even Caleb, stoic as always, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Then his phone buzzed. Turn on the TV. Julian was holding a press conference. Live. Every major network was carrying it. He stood at a podium outside his penthouse building, surrounded by lawyers and public relations people. His face was arranged in an expression of anguished concern. "It is with a heavy heart," Julian said, his voice trembling with perfectly calibrated emotion, "that I report my wife, Evelyn Cross Ashford, has been kidnapped from medical care by her brothers Nathan and Caleb Cross." He held up photographs. Nathan at a bar, fist raised, caught in the middle of a fight from years ago. Caleb's official army photo next to a newspaper article about PTSD and violence among veterans. These men have a history of violence and instability. My wife is pregnant and vulnerable. She needs medical attention that she is not receiving. I am offering a $1 million reward for any information leading to her safe return. Julian paused, letting the cameras capture his grief. I am begging the public. If you see these men, if you know where they are, please call the police immediately. They are armed and extremely dangerous. My wife needs help. My baby needs protection. He dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. I just want my family back. The press conference ended. The room was silent. Nathan stared at the television, his face pale with shock. He just painted us as kidnappers. On live television, in front of the whole country. The restraining order is worthless if we are in prison, Helen added, her voice heavy. His lawyers will argue you violated it by removing Evelyn from medical care without authorization. Evelyn looked at the screen. Julian's face was still visible, frozen in an expression of manufactured anguish. He changed the story, she said softly. I am not a survivor anymore. I am a victim of my disturbed brothers. He is not an abuser. He is a desperate husband trying to save his family. So what do we do? Caleb asked. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up, and there was something in her eyes that Nathan had not seen since they were children. The fearlessness, the fire, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. We change it back. She picked up her phone and dialed Megan Torres. Megan, she said when the reporter answered, I am going to turn myself in tomorrow morning, on live television, and I am going to tell the truth about Julian Ashford. The next morning, the steps of the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse. Every camera in the city was trained on the entrance. News vans lined the street. Reporters pressed against barricades, shouting questions at anyone who passed. The air was electric with anticipation. No one knew exactly what was going to happen, but word had spread that something big was coming, something that would change the Julian Ashford story forever. At precisely 9 o'clock, a yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. Evelyn Cross stepped out, alone, hands raised. She was still in her hospital gown under a borrowed coat. Her face was bruised and swollen. She could barely walk without assistance, but she held her head high as she faced the wall of cameras. My name is Evelyn Cross, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd. I am not mentally ill. I am not being held against my will. I am a survivor of domestic violence at the hands of my husband, Julian Ashford. The cameras clicked and flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Police officers moved forward with handcuffs drawn. Evelyn did not flinch. She did not waver. I have proof, she continued, that Julian Ashford murdered his first wife, Caroline Ashford, 6 years ago. I have recordings of him threatening me, confessing to his crimes, and planning to harm our unborn child. And I have documentation showing that he has been covering up his abuses for decades. She was arrested on camera, read her rights, put in handcuffs. But the story was now public, broadcast live to millions of viewers. There was no way to bury it, no way to spin it, no way to make it go away. Megan Torres's article ran that afternoon. Front page of the Tribune, above the fold. Exclusive. Evidence suggests billionaire CEO murdered first wife, abused second. The story contained everything. The recordings, Margaret's evidence, the financial documents, the testimony of former employees and household staff, the voicemail Carolyn had left the night she died. Within hours, it was picked up by every major outlet in the country. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. Julian Ashford's carefully constructed reputation crumbled like sandcastle in a hurricane. But there was a price. The stress of the arrest, the confrontation, the media circus, all of it triggered premature labor. Evelyn was rushed from booking to a prison hospital, handcuffed to a gurney, surrounded by guards. She gave birth to her son that night, 8 weeks early, in a cold, sterile room with fluorescent lights and institutional furniture. They let her hold him for 10 minutes before taking him away to the NICU. She named him James after her grandfather, the man who had taught her to be brave, the man who had told her when she was just a little girl that the most important thing in life was standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. Julian's lawyers filed for emergency custody of the newborn within the hour. But Caleb had anticipated this move. He had filed for temporary guardianship that morning, hours before Evelyn surrendered. The judge who granted the restraining order also granted the guardianship. James went home with his uncles, not with Julian. That night, Evelyn lay in a prison hospital bed, arms empty, watching the news on a ceiling-mounted television. Julian was giving another press conference. His expression was somber, sympathetic, a portrait of wounded dignity. "My heart breaks for my wife," he said. "She is clearly unwell. These accusations are the product of a disturbed mind, and I pray that she gets the help she needs. I only want what is best for her and our child. I forgive her for the terrible things she has said about me, and I will continue to fight for our family." The camera panned to show Nicole Blake standing behind him, still smiling, her hand resting possessively on her pregnant belly. Evelyn closed her eyes. She had won the battle for her son, but she was in prison, awaiting trial on charges that could send her away for years. Her brothers were fugitives, wanted for kidnapping and assault, and Julian was still free, still rich, still surrounded by lawyers and public relations people working around the clock to repair his image. This was far from over. You know, there is something people do not understand about situations like this. Everyone wants the dramatic ending. The villain in handcuffs, the hero vindicated, the credits rolling over a scene of triumph. But real life is not like that. Real life is messy and complicated and full of setbacks. Evelyn had done something incredibly brave. She had stood up to one of the most powerful men in the country and told the truth about what he had done to her. She had risked everything, her freedom, her reputation, her very life, and she was paying the price. Because that is what happens when you fight people with power. They fight back, with lawyers and money and media campaigns and all the weapons that ordinary people do not have access to. But sometimes fighting anyway is the only choice. Sometimes standing up for yourself is more important than winning. And sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys actually come out ahead. Vanessa Cole sat in her corner office at Ashford Dynamics, staring at 2 items on her desk. The first was a severance agreement, $10 million, immediate departure, a new identity if she wanted one. It was the kind of offer Julian made to people who had become liabilities. The second was a surveillance photograph. Vanessa entering her apartment building yesterday afternoon, taken by someone who should not have been watching her, someone who worked for Julian. Vanessa had been with Julian Ashford for 15 years. She had started as his personal assistant and worked her way up to head of communications. Along the way, she had buried more crimes than she could count. The first wife was an accident, Julian had told her after Caroline's death. She fell, hit her head, drowned before anyone could help her. Vanessa had been the one to craft the media response, to coordinate with the lawyers, to make sure the story stayed consistent. She had known it was a lie, of course she had known. But by then, she was in too deep. She had helped cover up too many things. Julian had too much on her, so she had kept quiet, kept working, kept telling herself that it was not her responsibility, that she was just doing her job, that Julian's victims had brought their troubles on themselves. But now the calculation had changed. Julian was under siege. The media coverage had been devastating. His board was meeting to discuss his future. Investors were fleeing, and Vanessa knew too much. She had seen this before. 15 years ago, when Julian's first wife's death threatened to become a scandal, several people who knew the truth had quietly disappeared. The detective, the medical examiner, a housekeeper who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Vanessa had helped make those disappearances happen. She knew exactly how Julian dealt with loose ends, and now she was one of them. The surveillance photograph told her everything she needed to know. Julian was watching her, evaluating her, deciding whether she could be trusted, The severance agreement told her the rest. Julian wanted her gone, quietly, permanently. If she took the money and disappeared, maybe she would be safe. Maybe Julian would let her go. But she knew Julian Ashford. She knew that he never truly let anyone go, that he never forgot a threat, that he never stopped until everyone who could hurt him was silenced. If she took the money and ran, she would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the car accident, the home invasion, the sudden illness that no doctor could explain. There was only one way to be truly safe. Julian Ashford had to fall. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had memorized but never intended to use. The number belonged to Caleb Cross. She had found it in Julian's security files, flagged as a threat to be monitored. It rang twice before a guarded voice answered. "I know who you are," Vanessa said without preamble. "I know what you are trying to do, and I have everything you need to destroy Julian Ashford." They met in a parking garage under an anonymous office building in New Jersey. Very clandestine, very dramatic, very necessary. Nathan was there, leaning against a concrete pillar, his arms crossed, his face a mask of barely contained hostility. Caleb stood beside him, more controlled, but no less dangerous. They hated her. Vanessa understood that. She had helped Julian Ashford hurt their sister. She had been part of the machine that had nearly destroyed Evelyn's life. But they were pragmatic. They would work with the devil himself if it meant bringing Julian down. "I need you to understand something," Vanessa said, handing over a hard drive. I'm not doing this because I have suddenly developed a conscience. I am doing this because Julian is planning to kill me, and the only way I survive is if he goes down first." Caleb took the drive. His expression did not change. "What is on here?" 15 years of his crimes, financial records showing the money laundering through his foundation, communications about Caroline's death, internal security files documenting how he monitored and controlled Evelyn, and recordings of Julian discussing what to do about you and your brother. Nathan stepped forward. His hands were clenched into fists. "Why did you stay?" he asked. "All these years, knowing what he was. How could you be part of that?" Vanessa looked at him. She did not flinch from the accusation in his eyes. "Because I am not a good person, Mr. Cross. I never have been. I saw what Julian was doing, and I did the math. I decided that my own survival was more important than the lives he was ruining." She paused. "I was wrong about the math. I know that now, but I cannot change what I did. All I can do is make sure he pays for it." Nathan looked like he wanted to say more, but Caleb put a hand on his arm. "We will use what you gave us," Caleb said. "And if it leads where you say it leads, Julian will go down. But understand this. If you are playing us, if this is some kind of trap, I will find you. And there will not be a severance package generous enough to save you." Vanessa met his gaze steadily. "I would expect nothing less." She turned and walked away, her heels echoing in the empty garage. The hard drive Vanessa had provided was everything Caleb had hoped for and more. Financial records tracing the flow of money through Julian's charitable foundation, wire transfers to offshore accounts, payments to law enforcement officials, medical examiners, and judges. A paper trail of corruption that spanned decades. But more than that, there were recordings. Julian's voice, captured in private conversations, discussing Caroline's death with chilling detachment. She was becoming a problem, threatening to go public. I could not allow that. Julian's voice discussing Evelyn's pregnancy with Nicole. "If the baby survives, we will deal with it. If not, so much the better. Either way, she will never see him grow up." Julian's voice giving instructions to his security team about Vanessa. "She knows too much. Start monitoring her movements. When the time is right, make it look like an accident." Caleb did not give everything to the FBI. Not yet. Instead, he sent the financial records to 3 carefully chosen recipients. First, a reporter at the Wall Street Journal, a woman named Catherine Mills, who had been investigating white-collar crime for 20 years and had never been afraid to take on powerful targets. Second, the Enforcement Division of the Securities and Exchange Commission. The agency had been building a case against Julian for years, but they had never been able to find the smoking gun they needed. Third, Edward Crane, Julian's biggest business rival, a man Julian had betrayed in a hostile takeover 5 years earlier, a man who had been waiting for an opportunity for revenge. Within 48 hours, the dominoes began to fall. The Wall Street Journal published an exclusive expose on Ashford Dynamics, questionable financial practices revealed at troubled firm. The article detailed years of accounting irregularities, suspicious transactions, and payments that could not be explained by legitimate business activities. The SEC announced a formal investigation. Subpoenas were issued. Bank records were frozen. Julian's lawyers went into overdrive, filing motions and objections and claims of prosecutorial overreach. But it was Edward Crane who delivered the killing blow. Using information from the leaked documents, Crane launched a hostile takeover bid for Ashford Dynamics. He approached the company's institutional investors with evidence of financial mismanagement and promises of new leadership. Within a week, he had secured enough shares to force a vote. Julian fought back with everything he had. He called in favors. He made threats. He offered bribes to anyone who might be swayed. But for the first time in his life, his money was not enough. Ashford Dynamics stock dropped 40% in a single day. Board members resigned. Key executives defected to competitors. Banks froze credit lines and demanded immediate repayment of loans. Julian Ashford's empire was crumbling around him, and he did not even know who was responsible. While Julian was distracted by the corporate war, Nathan made his own move. He tracked down Gerald Foster, the hospital administrator who had blocked them from seeing Evelyn. Foster was a small man with nervous eyes and a guilty conscience. He had helped Julian cover up Evelyn's injuries because that was what powerful donors expected. He had signed off on the fraudulent mental health documentation because Julian's lawyers had told him it was necessary. Nathan did not threaten him. He did not raise his voice or make demands. He just showed Foster the evidence. The medical records, the recordings, the financial documents showing payments from Julian's foundation to the hospital's endowment fund. "You helped cover up the abuse of a pregnant woman," Nathan said quietly. "When this goes public, and it will go public, your name will be on every story, unless you do something to make it right." Foster stared at the evidence for a long time. His hands were shaking. "What do you want me to do?" "Tell the truth. Sign an affidavit confirming that Julian pressured the hospital to restrict access to Evelyn. Confirm that the mental health documentation was fraudulent. Testify if necessary." Foster's face was pale with fear. "He will destroy me. He is already destroying himself." Nathan leaned forward. "The question is whether you go down with him or help put him away." Foster signed the affidavit that afternoon. With the corporate battle raging and his allies abandoning him, Julian made a desperate move. He reached out to Evelyn through intermediaries. He wanted to negotiate. He was willing to drop the custody case, to pay whatever settlement she demanded, to admit to certain unspecified mistakes in exchange for her silence. Evelyn agreed to meet. On her terms. A conference room in Helen's law office, recorded, with lawyers present. Julian arrived looking confident. His lawyers had told him the criminal case was weak. The recordings could be challenged as illegally obtained. The witnesses could be discredited as disgruntled employees with axes to grind. All he needed was Evelyn to drop the accusations, sign some papers, and disappear. "Sign the agreement, Evelyn," Julian said, sliding a document across the table. "I will let you see James once a year, supervised. That is more generous than you deserve." Evelyn looked at the man she had once loved, the man who had systematically destroyed her career, her relationships, her sense of self, the man who had beaten her and tried to kill her child. "What about Caroline?" she asked. "Did you let her see anyone before she died?" Julian's smile did not waver. "Caroline was an accident, a tragedy. I was devastated. Your hands were not devastated when they held her underwater." The door burst open. Nicole Blake stormed in, her face contorted with fury. She had been calling Julian for days. He had not answered. She had seen the news about the SEC investigation, the hostile takeover, the plummeting stock price. But that was not why she was here. "You told me we were partners," Nicole screamed. "You told me I was going to be the next Mrs. Ashford." Julian's expression flickered. "Nicole, this is not appropriate. I found the prenup in your desk. A prenup for your next marriage, to some 24-year-old associate in your London office. My name was not on the document anywhere." Julian's voice went cold. "You were useful. Now you are a liability, just like she was." He nodded toward Evelyn. Nicole's face went red with rage. "Useful? I did everything for you, everything. I pushed her down those stairs. I kept her drugged and isolated for months. I reported her every move. She turned to Evelyn, her voice rising. And do not think you are safe now. The first time did not work, but I can fix that. I will make sure you never. She stopped. Her eyes had found the camera in the corner of the room, the red light indicating it was recording. Helen held up her phone. Thank you, Miss Blake. That confession was very helpful. The door opened. Nathan and Caleb walked in. Behind them came Derek Morrison, FBI special agent and Caleb's former Army buddy, along with a team of 15 agents in tactical gear. And behind them came Edward Crane, smiling the satisfied smile of a man who had finally gotten his revenge. The hostile takeover had succeeded. Ashford Dynamics now belonged to him. Julian Ashford, Derek Morrison announced, stepping forward with handcuffs in his hand, you are under arrest for money laundering, tax fraud, wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and the murder of Caroline Wells Ashford. Julian's face went pale. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Julian looked at Evelyn. For the first time since she had known him, his mask had completely fallen. Underneath was nothing but cold, naked fear. You think you have won? His voice was unsteady. I will make bail in an hour. My lawyers will tear this case apart. You will never. Nathan stepped forward, close enough that Julian had to crane his neck to look up at him. Your lawyers just quit. Your board voted unanimously to cooperate with the investigation. Your accounts are frozen. Your mother's foundation is returning every donation you ever made. He leaned closer. You have nothing left, Julian. No money, no power, no name. When you walk into that prison, you will be just another inmate. And inmates have a very special hatred for men who hurt pregnant women. Julian's face went white. Nicole tried to run. She did not make it to the door. Nicole Blake, Derek Morrison said, you are under arrest for assault, attempted murder, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. As she was led away in handcuffs, Nicole screamed at Julian, this is your fault. I did everything for you. You said you loved me. Julian did not even look at her. The trial began 3 months later. It lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, financial records, audio recordings, video of Nicole's confession, Caroline's voicemail, medical records from both wives, testimony from former employees, household staff, and investigators. And there were the other women, 12 of them, coming forward from across 2 decades, each with her own story of abuse, manipulation, and terror at the hands of Julian Ashford. They told of the same pattern Evelyn had experienced, the charm, the isolation, the gradual erosion of self-worth, the violence, the cover-ups, the disappearance of anyone who tried to help. Julian sat calm through all of it, composed, controlled. His lawyers argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the witnesses were unreliable, that his client was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by jealous rivals and a vengeful ex-wife. Then Evelyn took the stand. She told her story in full. 3 years of marriage to a monster. The beatings, the threats, the night Julian and Nicole tried to kill her and her unborn child. She looked at Julian through her entire testimony. She did not flinch. She did not waver. He told me no one would believe me, Evelyn said, that I was crazy, that I was lucky to have him. For 3 years I believed him. She paused. I do not believe him anymore. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Murder in the first degree for the death of Caroline Ashford. Attempted murder for the attack on Evelyn. Assault, conspiracy, money laundering, obstruction of justice, tax fraud. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Julian remained composed through the verdict and sentencing. Perfect posture, neutral expression, the mask firmly in place until the very end. Then the bailiff stepped forward with handcuffs, and the mask cracked. Just for a moment, just long enough for Evelyn to see the monster underneath, the scared, pathetic creature that had been hiding behind the charm and the money and the power. Then Julian Ashford was led away, and he disappeared into a system where his wealth meant nothing and his name was just another number. Nicole Blake was convicted separately, 20 years for her role in the attempted murder and cover-up. Her baby was born in prison and placed with a loving foster family far from the shadow of Julian Ashford. Vanessa Cole turned state's witness. She served 18 months in a minimum security facility, then wrote a tell-all book about her years with Julian. All proceeds went to the Caroline and Evelyn Cross Foundation. Donna Miller pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice. She was sentenced to 5 years of probation and 500 hours of community service at a domestic violence shelter. Her mother survived the cancer, but their relationship never recovered. The shock waves spread across Manhattan and beyond. 6 board members of Ashford Dynamics resigned. 2 were indicted for conspiracy. The company was restructured under Edward Crane's leadership, with $50 million donated to domestic violence prevention organizations. The detective who had been reassigned after Caroline's death was reinstated with back pay and a public apology. The medical examiner was extradited from Costa Rica to face obstruction charges. The New York State Legislature passed the Caroline Cross Act, requiring hospitals to report injuries inconsistent with patient explanations and to provide domestic violence advocates for vulnerable patients. A federal task force was formed to investigate fixer networks used by wealthy abusers to silence their victims and cover up their crimes. Julian's mother publicly disowned him in a statement that made headlines around the world. "The man who committed these terrible crimes is not my son. My son died a long time ago. I do not know who took his place." 1 year later. A small house with a big backyard in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where children rode bicycles up and down the sidewalk and neighbors waved hello and nothing terrible ever seemed to happen. Evelyn sat on the porch, her laptop open on the table beside her, watching her son play in the grass. James was 1 year old now, healthy and happy and completely unaware of the darkness that had surrounded his birth. He laughed as he chased a ball across the yard, his small legs pumping, his face bright with joy. Nathan was at the grill wearing an apron that said "World's Okayest Cook," arguing with Caleb about whether the burgers were done. "They are charred," Caleb said. "They are caramelized. There is a difference. The difference is marketing." Margaret arrived with flowers, her face lighter than Evelyn had ever seen it. 6 years of fear and guilt had finally lifted from her shoulders. "I brought something," Margaret said, handing Evelyn a photograph. It showed 2 girls, maybe 10 and 12 years old. They were standing in a backyard much like this one, arms around each other, laughing at some long-forgotten joke. "Carolyn and me," Margaret said. "The summer before everything changed. I wanted James to know about his aunt, the one who was brave first." Evelyn held the photograph carefully. Carolyn had been brave. She had tried to leave, tried to fight back, tried to save herself. She had failed, but her failure had paved the way for Evelyn's success. "Thank you," Evelyn said softly. Helen called that afternoon with the latest update sheets. Julian's final appeal had been denied. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. Nicole had been transferred to a federal facility after attacking another inmate. The foundation was processing a record number of applications. "How are you holding up?" Helen asked. Evelyn looked at her son, still playing in the grass, at her brothers, still arguing about burgers, at Margaret, setting the table for dinner with the comfortable ease of family. "I am okay," she said. "Some days are harder than others, but I am okay." A car pulled into the driveway as they were finishing dinner. A woman got out, young, maybe 25, with dark hair and tired eyes, and the unmistakable look of someone who had been running for a very long time. She approached the porch slowly, clutching a folder to her chest. "Mrs. Cross?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "My name is Sarah. I read about you, about the foundation, about what you did." She took a shaky breath. "I think my husband is going to kill me. I do not know what to do. I do not have anywhere else to go." Evelyn stood, walked down the steps, took the woman's hand. "Come inside," she said. "We will figure it out together." That night, after Sarah had been connected with a lawyer and given a safe place to stay, Evelyn sat on the porch alone. The house was quiet. James was asleep. Her brothers had gone home. The stars were coming out, one by one, in the darkening sky. She thought about Caroline, about the 12 women who had testified at Julian's trial, about the hundreds more who had never found their voices. She thought about the foundation, the work they had done, the work still left to do. She thought about Julian, locked in a cell somewhere, finally paying for the lives he had destroyed. And she thought about the woman who had arrived that afternoon. Sarah. One more person in need, one more story of abuse and terror and desperate hope. There would always be more. Evelyn knew that now. For every Julian Ashford who was brought to justice, there were 10 more hiding behind money and power and the complicit silence of a system that protected abusers and punished victims. The fight would never really be over. But that was okay, because as long as there were people willing to stand up, willing to speak out, willing to reach out a hand to those in need, there was hope. Julian Ashford had believed he was untouchable. He had believed his money could buy silence, his charm could buy forgiveness, and his power could buy immunity from consequence. He was wrong, because he forgot the most dangerous thing in the world is not a billionaire in a penthouse. It is a woman who refuses to stay silent, and two brothers who made a promise. Some women survive, some women escape, and some women make sure it never happens to anyone else. Evelyn Cross was all three. Julian Ashford will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. His appeals have been exhausted. He will never be released. Nicole Blake was sentenced to 20 years. She will be eligible for parole in 12 years. Her daughter was adopted by a loving family and will never know her biological parents. The Caroline and Evelyn Cross Foundation has helped over 5,000 women escape abusive situations since its founding. It now operates in 23 states with a full-time staff of over 100 people. Nathan Cross runs the foundation's Columbus headquarters. He coaches his nephew's Little League team and volunteers at a shelter for homeless veterans on weekends. Caleb Cross serves as the foundation's Director of Security and Investigations. His PTSD is manageable now. He says having a purpose helps. Evelyn Cross's memoir, Some Women, spent 47 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. It has been translated into 32 languages. The film adaptation won 3 Academy Awards. Margaret Wells serves on the foundation's board of directors. She speaks at conferences about supporting survivors of domestic violence. She visits Caroline's grave every year on the anniversary of her death. 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. If you or someone you know needs help, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 1-800-799-7233. You are not alone. Someone will take your hand, and together you will figure it out.